As I am currently reeling from the absolute bullshit my love life has been, I've decided to do the great undertaking of reading a gothic novella about lesbian lovers. Hello, my name is Luna and welcome to my YouTube channel. My book club decided to read the gothic horror novel Carmilla. And I have so many thoughts, specifically because I've realized that this book is my final straw in realizing that classical novels are just not for me, I think. And I think if I genuinely want to read a classical novel, I have to be intrigued by the premise alone enough for me to actually decide to stick through and read the entire prose of the classical novel. And for example, this would be Wuthering Heights. I think I could genuinely suffer through Wuthering Heights purely because I think the premise of Heathcliff and Cathy and the racism and their tortured romance should be entertaining enough for me to suffer through the way that classical writers, specifically writers from an older age, write. Because I'll get into more details of why I say this later on. But first, let's do a quick plot summary of the book, and then we move on to the thoughts about the book and classical literature as a whole. Okay, so we open up to Laura in the future writing in her diary, accounting about a weird time in her childhood. I think it was roughly summer, right? She says that she is a English woman, or at least she comes from an English family, but has been moved into Germany. She currently stays in a castle in Styria. She lives with her father and two women who take care of her, Mademoiselle, who is her French teacher, and a Madame Perrodon, who is her governess. So, at first, we enter into the prologue and we hear about Laura having this weird nightmare as a child. And the nightmare features a weird creature being in her room, and eventually this beautiful woman, deciding to lie next to her. Again, this is the first time in the dream, or in the memory, Laura says that this is the first time ever she has awoken to her attendants not being in the room with her. So this woman comes and lies next to Laura, and the two just sleep together. Again, Laura's a child, so it's not a sexual sleep together. It's more so they're just cuddling, right? And then eventually she feels like two needles are sticking into her skin, and she wakes up and shrieks, and the person who's next to her shrieks in horror as well and disappears. That is the prologue. We then focus on Laura's day-to-day life, about how she lives in this massive palace and has a lot of people working with her. But for the purposes of the book only focuses on four main people: the father, the two women who are taking care of Laura, and Laura herself. We then hear that Laura was excited to meet up with this woman, with this ward of her father's friend, General Spielsdorf, right? General Spielsdorf has a niece. Her name is Bertha. Laura and Bertha were excited to meet each other for the first time, and because again, Laura is the only child in the estate, and specifically the only child of her class in the vicinity. So she's very much living an isolated life, and she was super excited to have a friend, Bertha. But General Spielsdorf sends a letter to Laura's father, and in the letter it says that Bertha had died from mysterious circumstances, and General Spielsdorf, right, would be hunting down whatever led to her death and could not come and visit the family. Laura's father is sad about this, but is understandable. It is what it is. Later down the line, Laura and her father end up going on a walk, right, on their estate, and a carriage accident occurs in front of them. In the carriage, there is a mother and daughter. The daughter was knocked unconscious in the carriage accident, whereas the mother was not knocked unconscious. The mother we don't get her name at all throughout the entire book, so I'm just going to call her Countess. So the Countess is like, hey, I can't really take care of my child. I have to go on an urgent mission, and she's sick, not sick, she's injured, so I can't take her with me. Can you look after her? Laura's father says yes. And this child ends up getting taken to the castle. We then find out that this child's name is Carmilla, the titular character. And when Laura gets a close-up with Carmilla and they speak for the first time, Laura realizes that the girl from her dream in the prologue is actually just Carmilla. Carmilla talks to Laura a bit, and the two begin a very intense friendship, which devolves into romantic territory. Like, they kiss each other, they talk about love, they talk about soulmates, and they have a very dear relationship with each other. But Carmilla is kind of a bitch in, like, not like she's a bitch. She's more so just like snooty and like kind of rude. So, and there are many instances of this. The main one being, there is a funeral that happens. Okay, I'll get to it later. There is a string of deaths that happen in a nearby village. One day, while Laura and Carmilla were sitting out speaking, as they usually do with each other, a funeral procession walks by, and Laura, saddened, begins singing with the funeral procession because they're singing a grieving hymn, right? Carmilla's like, ugh, you're going to deafen me, you're so out of tune, and keeps on telling her not to sing up and not to grieve and not to join in the somber event. And this is kind of more of an instance where Carmilla is kind of being a bitch and kind of being overall a dickhead, in my personal opinion. But also, I don't really care about Carmilla like that. You'll understand why. I don't think her character is that bad. I don't think she's like an No, she is evil, but like I'll get to why later. So the funeral procession goes by, and the two end up meeting this peddler once they get back to this castle. The peddler says, hey, I'm selling these trinkets that will protect you from what's going around in the nearby village. It will protect your dreams as well. After this, we then find out that Carmilla tends to lock her door when she goes to sleep, and it's a habit that Laura eventually picks up. So Laura and Carmilla take the trinkets, right? And it is very important that you note that the peddler and Carmilla have an interesting interaction where Carmilla kind of mocks what he's doing and calls it superstition. But also the peddler tends to have like this intense gaze off with her. They have like this staring match for a bit. It doesn't go anywhere. So they eventually leave, and Laura ends up going to bed one night, and she ends up having a very bad dream of this creature haunting her and like this cat-like being just being in her room. This dream is a similar symptom to what the people in the village are suffering. Laura's like, it can't be the same thing, and I don't want to worry anyone, so I'm going to lie and say that I'm not suffering from any of these symptoms. Then we find out that there was a painting being commissioned by Laura's father. Again, we don't get his name. Laura's father commissions this painting of a former countess from this place called Karnstein, which is a ruined village or ruined territory close to the main castle. Once the commission is completed, it is, well, not commissioned, it's like being recommissioned. It's being fixed, repaired. The artwork's getting repaired. After the artwork gets repaired, it turns out that the countess in the image, Countess Mercala, looks exactly like Carmilla. We move on a little bit. Laura still suffers from her symptoms and she's getting worse, but also she's living for a longer period of time, because usually when the first symptoms of the dreams come, the people tend to die like a couple days afterwards. For Laura, this has been going on for weeks now. So she's actually living the longest out of everyone who's been suffering similar symptoms to her. And she's like, it can't be the same thing that they're suffering from because I'm not dead. And she still doesn't tell her dad until one point she breaks down and tells people, and they eventually get her a doctor. The doctor comes in and says that, hey, your child is going to be fine. All you have to do is have her have an attendant for the 24 hours and she should be right as rain. The doctor doesn't go into detail about what his hypothesis is, but at this point in time, you should know that 1, the needle pricks are vampire marks. 2, the dreams are the vampires coming into them in their sleep in whatever form they want to come into the people's and biting them and draining them of their blood, which is why they're saying, hey, as long as your daughter is attended for the next 24 hours, she should be fine, because she's on the point of death, like she's on the brink of death, and it would only take one more bite from a vampire to kill her. So all you need to do is to make sure that she doesn't get bitten for the next 24 hours, and her body should produce more blood and she will live. So that's what the doctor is hypothesizing, or at least thinking, but he does not actually tell this to Laura or her father. So they do that. Madame Perrodon stays with her for the entire night and everything's fine. Or it should be. See, Laura ends up having a different nightmare. She sees Carmilla being covered in blood and she wakes up and shrieks. She leaves her room and bangs on Carmilla's door, but Carmilla's not waking up. And again, Carmilla locked her door, so she can't just open it. Laura ends up going around the castle getting people's help, and eventually they break down the door only to find that the room is empty. But if the room is empty and the door is locked, but the key to the room is still on the inside and the windows are shut, they end up wondering, how did Carmilla get out? So they do a whole search party. It lasts for hours. The sun rises, and eventually Carmilla is found in a drawing room. Laura's father hypothesizes that, hey, Carmilla must have just been sleepwalking, and that's why she went missing for so long. And the only reason why we missed her in our search was because, and the only reason they missed her in their search was because after we had searched the drawing room, she must have walked in. This hypothesis is further supported by the fact that people have seen Carmilla being in a trance-like state around the grounds at night. So they're like, oh, it's just sleepwalking. So on a different day, a couple days later, right? And again, Laura's getting objectively better, right? So they decide, hey, let's all go out to town, right? Let's go to Karnstein to have a nice little picnic. It will be a nice time. So Laura and her father decide to go ahead, whereas Carmilla and Madame Perrodon, the governess, would stay behind because Carmilla was going to oversleep. However, they did write a letter to Carmilla telling her to go with them, right? So Laura and her father go to Karnstein, right? Or the ruined village. And on their way, they meet up with General Spielsdorf. General Spielsdorf then decides to tell Laura and her father about his whole ordeal that he suffered with, right, with his niece Bertha. He sends some of his men ahead to the village and regales the story. The story goes as follows. One night, General Spielsdorf and his niece Bertha decided to go to a party, a masquerade. And at the masquerade, there was this woman who seemed like she knew General Spielsdorf, but General Spielsdorf didn't know her because she had a mask on. So while he was playing guessing games, his niece Bertha was becoming friends with the woman's child, who was known as Millarca. They end up hitting it off, and the woman is like, oh, I have to go. It is then revealed that she's some form of countess and she has urgent matters to attend to. Hint, hint. If you didn't catch on by now, this story is very similar to the story that we got with Carmilla. I'm going to now put up the names that we've had for this little girl, right? The names of the people who are similar to Carmilla. It is Carmilla, Millarca, and Mercala. It's dumb. If you didn't catch the hint now, they're all the same person. Anyway, the story goes on to say that she had to go away, so she left, and she said that General Spielsdorf must take care of her child, right, Millarca. General Spielsdorf agrees because he wants his niece, who is currently his ward, to have some company in his castle, because again, Bertha also suffers from what Laura deals with, being isolated and being the only child in the vicinity, because again, they live in like these big lavish castles. General Spielsdorf takes his niece and Mercala out, they party for a bit, and they walk back. But as they're walking back to their chambers, right, Millarca ends up going missing, and they look for her for a bit, but they can't find her. They go to sleep, and the next morning they find her, and she says, oh, I got lost in the crowd and I was terribly embarrassed. And eventually I got some help from people and I was able to find you. That's her excuse. They're like, okay, let's not think about it. They end up taking her back to the castle that General Spielstoff stays. And eventually Bertha gets sick and her sickness is rapid. He gets doctors to her. General Spielstoff gets doctors for his niece. He gets 2 doctors. One doctor is like, hey, I have a theory, but let us get a different doctor just to like help us out here. So he gets a different doctor, a second opinion, and the first doctor is like, so the second doctor is like, hey, your daughter is just dying. We don't know what the fuck's going on, but she is in fact dying. Maybe she'll be fine. Maybe she won't be fine. The first doctor is like, right. So the doctor that I got is not actually smart at all. In fact, I think your child is suffering from vampire attacks and that's why she's sick. The doctor says, hey, your child is suffering from a vampire. Just watch her. Tonight, the vampire will strike again. And if it does, your child will die. Stop the vampire. General Spielstoff is like, I don't believe them, but I'm going to try. Let me try. They told him to call for a priest. He called for a priest. But he also watched his niece go through the undertaking. It's very similar to what happened with, Laura. Anyway, so General Spielstoff watches his niece and eventually he does see a figure rising from the shadows and this figure ends up striking King and inevitably kills Bertha because he was so stunned that he did not act in time. So his niece died because, again, he was not fully prepared to protect her. I'm just going to say that. And also the vampire, right? Laura was very shocked to hear that the symptoms that Bertha was suffering from were the same symptoms that she was suffering from. General Spielstoff says that he's been currently looking for her tomb because he believes that the vampire should be resting in its tomb and he wants to kill it. Eventually, he found this tomb with the help of a Moravian man, or at least the descendant of an original Moravian noble who had come to Karnstein years earlier. This man is known as the Baron. He's a vampire hunter. He's quite literally the equivalent of Van Helsing. General Spielstoff says, hey, I'm going to kill this vampire. Eventually, Madame Peridon and Carmilla end up coming to Karnstein and arriving. And Carmilla makes eye contact with General Spielstoff. And all of a sudden, her face turns into this grotesque, monstrous look. And General Spielstoff instantly tries to kill her. She grabs his hand using her super strength, which canonically she has. And she makes him drop the weapon and then she disappears. Laura, who's there, is like super concerned and says, Carmilla, no. And then confronting General Spielstoff about like, oh, what did you do to Carmilla? And General Spielstoff is like, oh, so that's what she calls herself, right? So this is the point where you find out that 1, Carmilla isn't in fact a vampire, which I feel like was obvious. And 2, it is the point in time where the big reveals are happening and Laura just realized that the person she had gotten such a strong and infatuous relationship with, a strong, all-consuming relationship with, is actually a vampire that wants to kill her. Anyway, which, by the way, you could argue that Carmilla never really wanted to kill Laura, but more so keep Laura as a pet, because Laura, again, is the longest living girl out of all of her victims. Also, Carmilla only attacked girls throughout the entire book. Just saying. So, to make a long story short, Laura is told to get a priest. The priest gets taken to the tomb, and they eventually open up the tomb of Countess Mircalla, because it turns out that Millarca and Carmilla are simply just Countess Mircalla from all those years ago, before the ruination of Karnstein. They open up her tomb, and they find her bathing in blood. They eventually kill her, and she releases this painful shriek, and that is the end of the story. Literally. And now we go into the epilogue. In the epilogue, we get some slight details about Karnstein and how the original bounty hunter who had come to Karnstein to hunt vampires, he had been hunting vampires for his entire life, and he had been writing these journals that he passed on to his descendant. the Baron. The Baron is like, yeah, my ancestor fucked up and had secretly removed the tombstone or the markers of Countess Mircalla's grave as a way to protect her. Which, yeah, whatevs. We then get more information about vampires as a whole, because we find out that, one, in order to become a vampire, you must be a more or less wicked person, and then you must kill yourself. And then, as a now forged vampire, you have the ability to make new vampires by killing your victims, and there is a 50-50 chance, not even a 50-50 chance, they just said that there is some probability that they would too turn into vampires post-death. We then find out that vampires have two forms of existence: an amphibious existence and a waking existence. In their waking existence, they are able to walk in their sunlight. This is supported by them drinking blood. Then they have their amphibious existence, which is to simply exist, and this is supported by them sleeping in their graves at certain hours. This is where I assume we got the myth about vampires liking to sleep in coffins. So that's practically it. We only really find out some decent lore about what vampires are as a species at the end in the epilogue. But anyway, now for my final thoughts, because holy fuck do I have a lot. And you might be like, okay, by your own recap of the entire book, because again, this is a novella. This recap is very short. And the thing is, I could have expanded on so many different plot points and dialogues and analyzed this like an English teacher. But I don't feel like I, one, have the degree to do that. Two, want to do that. Because God, this book frustrated me. Because how are you going to focus on a supernatural creature and then only reveal their supernatural nature and their abilities at the end of the book in an epilogue, bitch? Okay, so now to get into my thoughts about this book as a whole and classical literature. Okay, I don't really have that strong thoughts. It's just a few. One, I think this book is well written, but a couple pet peeves. One, this is a gothic horror novel, but in the book, it uses the word gothic to describe things in general, and I let certain things slide because it was genuinely talking about actual gothic architecture, so that was fine. But at some points in times, they just use gothic as a way to describe the atmosphere, and I was just like, ew. But that's like a personal pet peeve. I feel like it's because the writer, Joseph Sheridan, decided not to actually do descriptors, but also he did somehow spend a shitload of time doing an amazing job with his prose in describing the castle and the surrounding areas and giving me details about cliques and trying to do some geographical world building, but he didn't do that much world building for his actual supernatural creature, which, by the way, this book is supposed to introduce to the world, because this is one of the earliest vampire novels in existence. But okay, let's just move past that for the sake of moving past that. I found the story to be kind of lackluster in general. I wanted Carmilla to be slightly more evil. Yes, she kills people, but is that it? Yeah, she's sometimes a bitch, but is that it? And yes, their romance is romantic, and there's no way to say that, oh no, they're just friends. They fully at some point kiss each other on the lips. So I know that they very much are gay for each other, but also the romance is kind of it's kind of just boring, and it's which leads me to my other critique about this book. It suffers from the same thing that all classical literature suffers from, where literally nothing happens. Entertaining premises, but the way that the writers write the novel, I will be reading a chapter and be like, what the fuck was the point of this chapter? And it genuinely doesn't fucking matter, because this book is the literal plot recap tells you everything that you actually need to know about the fucking plot, and the little details that I decided to cut out, you could easily go look it up on Wikipedia and you would get the same information just from looking at the plot summary. And also, by the fucking way, the book itself, I think books need to justify themselves. I feel like at some point all books need to justify themselves in the sense that, hey, if I'm reading you, I need to read you for either I'm doing this for academic purposes and I'm trying to buff up my knowledge, or I'm trying to read this for entertainment and I need it to be a leisurely and enjoyable time. And if that's not why I'm reading this book, why would I read this book besides to just say that I've read this book? And I'm sorry, reading a book is not that much of an accomplishment, because I feel like I've just wasted time that I'm never going to get back, time that I could have been doing literally anything that was genuinely more productive and more entertaining and had actually spiked up my dopamine, which could be more of an issue with the modern generation's desire to be consistently pleasured, and how Gen Z is a hedonistic society and we just need and desire consistent dopamine hits, and when we don't get them we get pissy. But I don't give a fuck about signs. Let's focus on the book now. And another example of this is Dorian Gray. Dorian Gray has a lot of chapters where you're just like, ugh, I could not be bothered. Because the writers tend to overemphasize certain things while ignoring really good things. For example, in Dorian Gray, I think I would have preferred a more detailed analysis of the painting itself and how the bargain happened, the cosmic forces at play. I would like to dive deeper into the supernatural aspects of the thing. Or hypothetically, give me more fucking romance instead of implied bullshit. Tell me that they are lovers and tell me that they cannot live without each other. Have them go on beautiful romantic dates where I'm literally holding my breath as I wait for them to lightly graze each other's hands. Or have them fuck. Literally, I don't give a fuck what type of romance you want to portray to me, whether you want it to be explicit or not. But if you're going to add romantic subplots, make them at least decently entertaining. Make them entertaining so that I'm not feeling like I'm wasting my time. Because if you're not getting into the supernatural aspects of your supernatural book and you're not focusing on the romantic subplots or the undertones of romance within your novel, I feel like I'm just spending my time on bullshit. Because there was no need to have that one fuck-ass chapter in Dorian Gray where he just talks on and on and on and on about the shit that he just buys and buys. And I get why. And the thing is, you might be like, this is dumb because you're not truly realizing these books' potential and you're not actually reading these books to see all of the things. There are reasons why these authors wrote the way that they do, the diction, it all fucking matters. All authors. But then again, every single author out there thinks that every single word in their book matters, whereas the reader genuinely fucking doesn't. I think a lot of words don't actually matter in a lot of novels, but the authors will forever believe that they do, solely because they want to stroke their own egos and want to be pretentious dicks who appear smart than anyone else in the room. And honestly, as an author myself, I do think that, yeah, I also suffer from the same issues. But I also can criticize other authors when they do this because it genuinely is just frustrating. I know Dorian Gray is a hedonist. You literally talk about his bullshit drug addiction and how he's in opium dens and how literally everybody fucking knows his name. You talk about how he falls in love with multiple fucking people and breaks their heart because he wants to enjoy their love. And we talk about his narcissistic tendencies with the way that he views himself as this good person for abandoning somebody who loves him because he knew that he was a shitty person, without actually taking into account how they would feel about him abandoning them. I get that, right? I'm not stupid. I understand why you've written it the way that you've written it, but it genuinely just comes off as redundant and a waste of my fucking time. Anyway, that's enough about that. Actually, no, it's not enough. I feel like that's my overall critique about a lot of classical literature. That the authors I'm sure that the authors, when it was their time to write these novels, or when the novels first came out, they were genuinely geniuses. And I'm not saying that I'm smarter than them, right? I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that they are no longer my cup of tea because they no longer scratch an itch that I need when I read things. I like to read fucking 600-page fantasy novels about intricate magic systems and the politics of the kingdoms. Like, I care, like, I'm heavily into fantasy politics. It's like one of my favorite things. It's why I loved the White Tower subplots in The Wheel of Time, like, genuinely. And I feel like if you're not giving me something similar to that, where there's drama, intrigue, suspense, a little bit of magic here and there, I genuinely will not be entertained. Especially if you are supposed to be one of the greatest supernatural novels out there. If it's not slightly magically entertaining, like, genuinely, we see a few hocus pocus things that Carmilla does throughout the novel, but it's genuinely not enough. I also need to stop using the word genuinely. But yes, that is it for my thoughts about this book, actually, because I'm actually getting very tired, and I don't think I'm adding much to the conversation. I'm just, like, ranting at this point, because, again, I did this without a script, and that's valid, because I don't want to have a script. Again, I'm, like, dealing with my own emotional baggage, and maybe that's the reason why this book has turned kind of sour, and why classical literature in my mind is very sour, because whenever I read classical literature, I'm not in the correct headspace for classical literature, but it is what it is. Anyway, that's been it from me. If you like this video, please like the video. Please subscribe to see future content. Go check out my other video and my other content. I have plenty of playlists where I talk about other things. For example, I have Keeping It Casual, where I just do whatever the fuck I want. This video will not be going to Keeping It Casual, because this is more of a, like, rant-ish video, where it's more centered around the actual theme of my YouTube channel, which is novels and stuff. So, yes. Thank you for watching, and I will see you guys next time.